national champ.
All right, I'm done. I'm done. If you're gonna continue that, I'm done.
Done with what? So you don't acknowledge that we're national champs?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't, because it's
Okay.
it's tainted in 100% controversy.
Except
If
your fan base is the only fan base in Michigan State who
that's
feels that way.
that's not true. There's a bunch of people who don't feel that way.
Florida State.
But we're
Okay,
gonna
well, okay. Well, Florida State has a separate argument then
but
with
we're gonna
Alabama.
move on from this. So we have a new show, new flow, new format here for everybody. We're gonna go ahead and dive into it. We have a clock here that you guys could see, so we're gonna go 5 minutes a topic, and we're just gonna go around the panel here, and let everybody get their thoughts in on these topics here. We got a great show. Our first one up is going to be Caitlin Clark. Uh, Ethan, let's. So Caitlin Clark here, she broke the all-time scoring record for both men and women, so she's now the all-time leader. She passed Pete Maravich on 2 technical foul free throws, which was awesome. I would have liked to see it being a 3, probably like the rest of the country, right? When she's just chucking it up from the logo. But it happened in the way it happened. Happy for her. Happy for women's basketball to see this happen. Um, Records are meant to be broken, right? As the old famous saying goes, they're meant to be broken. Um, so I'm gonna go with we'll start here with Ethan.
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's fantastic. The women's game has grown immensely in the last couple years with all the attention to Caitlin Clark and just everything that she's done off the court or on the court and off the court. I agree. I would have liked it to be seen broken on some sort of spectacular jaw-dropping play or just something, not a free throw. But it's still a point and it works. In the same concept, I am not the biggest fan of Caitlin Clark. I think it is. I don't want to say it's a show. I mean, she's immensely talented, but to me, she just is like a Russell Westbrook or a James Harden at the women's level. Hopefully, when she jumps up the chain into the WNBA, that she picks up defense. Um, I was looking up like her war for basketball or wins on the floor or win shares, and her offensive win shares are astronomical. I mean, offensively, she's added about 11 wins to Iowa this year, which is almost 2.5 full wins over second place. But defensively, she's only, I think it was 1.1 wins. So definitely all offense. Hopefully it translates to the next level. And hopefully that Iowa translates far in the tournament too. I'd like to see Iowa and Ohio State both go far in the tournament. I think they're two of the best 5 teams out there.
Absolutely. Drew, your thoughts? Caitlin Clark.
Um, she's phenomenal. She's very fun to watch. This is her breaking the record. It's a great thing for women's basketball. It's a great thing for the Big Ten, especially. Um, this year has been a great year for women's basketball. Caitlin Clark is actually third all time in women's scoring record in all divisions. She's Division 1. She's number one for men's and women's, but for women's, she's third all time. There's this girl named Grace Beyer from the University of Health Services and Pharmacy in St. Louis, who is graduating this year. She has 3,900 points, which is just over 300 more points than Caitlin Clark. She's averaged 35 the past 3 seasons, and she's getting her doctorate next week. So, or
Nice.
in May. So, shout out to her. Um,
So she
Hopefully,
plays for the New Jersey Institute of Technology of women's basketball.
basically, it's
Okay.
NAIA. It's very low, but she's an absolute monster. Hopefully, Caitlin Clark can make the WNBA relevant and bring some eyes there.
Absolutely. Corey, go ahead.
She's phenomenal. What she's done for the sport and making people want to go watch Iowa basketball, whether it be men's or women's, is just kind of insane. Um, she's just one of those once in a generational. It's kind of unfortunate that the only way they talk about her is because of her scoring record, where if she was at South Carolina or UConn, they would talk about her every single day. Um, just kind of the way it is. She'll be the number one pick in the WNBA draft. She'll change. I mean, she'll make people want to watch the WNBA. However, again, in the WNBA, people pick up 90 feet. So she's not going to be shooting from half court. But her range, just like Steph Curry, can literally translate anywhere. Um, yeah, I mean, she's bringing Iowa basketball to the map. The Big Ten, it's good for the Big Ten. And they've made, I mean, I can't even remember the last time outside of the last few weeks that I saw, or last few years, that Iowa women's basketball is on national TV. That doesn't happen. Um, she's a
Absolutely.
phenomenal talent, and can't wait to see what she does more.
Absolutely. Bonus question here for this while we're on the Caitlin Clark topic. I've heard the term thrown out there. She's the GOAT of women's college basketball. I gotta say, I don't as much as good as she is, in my opinion, fellas, the GOAT of women's college basketball, until somebody does basically what Caitlin Clark and this other individual did, they would become the GOAT, and that is Breanna Stewart from UConn. She went
Or
4 for
Maya Moore.
4. Well, but like here's the
I was
one
going to say
thing.
Diana Taurasi.
She's good too.
Diana Taurasi or Breanna Stewart are my two that I would put up there, but I give the edge to Breanna because she went 4 for 4 with 4 MVPs. She won 4 straight titles and won 4 Final Four MVPs. That has never been done in the history of women's basketball. Like, Diana Taurasi didn't do that. Maya Moore didn't do that. Breanna Stewart did. So, in my opinion, if you want to be the GOAT of college basketball for women, you gotta do what Breanna Stewart did, and then you gotta do what Caitlin Clark did. You gotta be an all-time leading scorer.
What if
To be
Caitlin
fair,
Clark gets a ring this year?
It's hard to
Also-
go though. Again, so 4 for 4, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But to be fair, you also have to look at like Diana Taurasi on the teams that she played on. She would have broken the scoring record had she played as a freshman. She didn't really play that much as a freshman because of her team being really solid. Maya Moore is another one I think is really good, who just kind of left college early to go pro. She would have potentially done that too. I mean, Breanna Stewart was just, you hadn't seen someone, it was like Brittany Griner. You hadn't seen someone that size be able to shoot the ball like that.
She
but
was on
I
a
think-
talented team too.
But if Caitlin Clark can win a title at Iowa, I think she's in the conversation. She may not be, but she would be more in the conversation. There's a lot of people that
you're splitting hairs. You're splitting hairs though between like, all of these, athletes.
Well,
you're
you
really
can
just
make the-
splitting hairs here.
And you can make the argument for Candace Parker too, because she changed college women's basketball too.
Absolutely. Ethan.
Yeah. No, the GOAT. Yeah, I went right to Maya Moore. I think also with some of those UConn supporting staffs, I think that boosts a lot of exposure and easy to get recognized. And if you're doing big things on a national exposure level, you're probably going to get more rewards. I also went Lisa Leslie, but she didn't do a whole lot at USC. She's just a phenomenal athlete for the game.
Yeah. A legend of the game. She's just a legend. Yeah, like same thing with like Sue Bird, legend of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Next up here, we have the NCAA is thinking about expanding the big dance for the men's side. I've heard a float around of like adding 4 more teams, going up to like, expanding it an entire round of like up to 96. I'm going to go ahead and give my little opinion on about it. Leave the big dance alone. Just leave it alone. You don't need to expand a tournament that already has what now 68 teams that make the tournament. I don't think you need to expand it past that because if you do, in my opinion, you're diluting what the tournament really meant to begin with, right? It was the greatest tournament. It is like the greatest tournament probably outside of the World Cup in all of sports. Where you actually do get a true national champion out of, the big dance here. So my opinion is don't expand it. If you're going to change, if the NCAA wants to change anything about the tournament, it needs to be the if you win your conference championship, you are guaranteed to the field of 64. If you win your conference championship, you are guaranteed. I don't care if you're Monmouth, Holy Cross, Austin Pay,
But they are.
Southeast Missouri.
They
No,
are.
no, they're not.
You're talking about regular season
No, I'm
conference
talking
champion.
like your conference, your tournament conference champions. They get an
You get an
auto
auto bid if
bid.
you win.
Correct.
Yes, they
However,
do.
though, they have those play-in games as 16 seeds, and you have these conference champions playing as a play-in game in the field of 68, and they have to play in to get to the field of 64. They should automatically get a bid to the field of 64, and those play-in games should be for the teams that you consider the last four in and your last four out. Let those 8 teams play each other for those final four spots. That is my opinion. I'm going to start the timer here. Corey, your thoughts on that? On just the general expansion of the big dance, if it's a good idea, bad idea, and
I don't think it matters whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. I think, again, the NCAA is all about money, so that's what they're going for. I think you're still
absolutely.
going to have the same conversations, whether if you have 92 teams in it or if you have 65 teams in it, you're still going to have whoever that last team is that doesn't get out feels like they should be in it. As for the 64, or as for like should be in the 64, I don't think it matters. I think being in the play-in is still the NCAA tournament. Winning a game in the NCAA tournament is, as we've seen the last couple of years, there's teams that hadn't made the NCAA tournament that have won games in the play-in, which considers and counts as a NCAA tournament victory. Um, I again, the 16 seeds, I think it's just one of those things where it is what it is. If you wanted to be in the 64 before the conference tournament, then just only lose one or two games in your conference.
Drew, I'll kick it over to you here.
Um, I think there's this weird obsession with expansion going around college sports.
Absolutely, there
That's
is.
just like, why? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The March Madness is fine. I could see your point where if you win your conference tournament, you shouldn't have to play in the first four. I do like that. But Corey also made a good point as like these teams like Monmouth, they can get a tournament win there. So I mean that's good for the program. But like this is just completely absurd. It's silly. Why have we gone so long with the big dance being the big dance and now we want to expand and change it? Is it because of college football? Yes. Is it because of TV money? Yes. It's just dumb.
Yeah, Ethan.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's 363 teams in Division One. Um, I mean, if you think all of those teams are worth a championship bid, we're all going to probably disagree. I don't think expanding is the answer. It is a money grab, like everybody said. I agree with what's also has been said. If you win the conference tournaments, you should get into the field. I also think the play-in games should be for all 4 16 seeds. If you're worth an 11 seed, you should already be getting an 11 seed. You should be playing in for an 11 seed. That's never made any sense to me personally, because if this team is that much better than all these other teams, 25, 30 teams, then this shouldn't even be an argument. It should be a play in for all 4 16 seeds, in my personal opinion. I think 68 is the perfect number. If you are going to add in extra you're going to have to scrap the NIT, which is a more fun tournament half the time than the NCAA once all the big teams go down by weekend two. So last year was the best tournament we've had in probably 15 years.
Absolutely.
So
It was a great tournament last year. Speaking about the NIT though, I'm glad you brought that up, Ethan, because I have an idea for the NCAA. If you want more money, like you want to expand it for a money grab, take the NIT champion, take the big dance champion, and the week after, those championship games are played in basketball, like the NIT championship is played and then the NCAA tournament championship game is played, the next weekend, have those two teams go at each other. Let them play each other.
it'd be a murder.
It,
9 times out of 10, that's a 15, 20-point game.
but
Also, you'd have a lot of opt
but
outs.
who know? You may, but like, who knows? I mean, we never thought in our lifetime we'd probably see a 16 seed upset at number one, and it's happened twice in the past like 5 or 6 years. You
What's
know?
interesting is what you just brought up, opt-outs. I'm surprised some of these guys haven't jumped on the bowl opt-out wagon and started opting out of a tournament, which means a tournament
Well,
means more than a bowl game.
it does. It absolutely does. And I don't think you're ever going to see like your Zach Eady's, like your high-end draft pick guys. I don't ever foresee them opting out of the tournament just because like that is how you get to play for your national championship, right? And in football, obviously it's a little different where if you're not if in the BCS era, if you weren't in your top two, you didn't get to play for the national title. If you weren't, um, and now in the playoff era, right? If you weren't in the top four, you weren't gonna get to play for a title. So I kind of got, like the whole football opt out aspect where, is it worth Marvin Harrison Jr. going out there and playing a quote unquote meaningless bowl game just to potentially tear his Achilles, tear his ACL, get injured, where then he literally gets his draft stock hit. So,
I mean, Zion opted out half of his senior year, and it was an
yeah,
injury, but he quit playing, and he still got drafted pretty well.
but he wouldn't. He played in the tournament. Like that's the thing. He did not back out of the tournament. He played in the tournament. He may have gotten injured at some point during the
But
tournament that year.
nobody's going to back out when you have a chance to win a national title.
Yeah.
Nobody in football is opting out if they're in the play.
Exactly.
Nobody is opting out. So you won't get opt outs. I mean, the only thing I could see is if a person, for instance, in NCAA basketball, which usually doesn't happen very often, where there is one player who's so much better than everybody else that the risk of him getting hurt potentially instead of being like the number one pick, like if you had a guy that was like a LeBron James, instead of if he got hurt, in the conference tournament and he could play in the NCAA tournament, he might not just because
That's a good
he could
point.
worsen it and it would affect him. To me, that's the only way because
Yeah.
if you have a number one seed that has two guys sit out in the NCAA tournament, they're not a number one seed anymore.
That's true.
I think the last instance of that would have been Anthony Davis. He was the last dominant player in college basketball.
I mean, let's just be fair though. That entire Kentucky team was ridiculous with like John Wall, Boogie Cousins. Like that team was just ridiculous. But I agree with you,
John Wall was
Ethan.
on that team.
Yeah, pretty sure John Wall. Like, cause wasn't that the year that Calipari
think
brought in the
Anthony-
1 through 5?
I think John Wall went the year before.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm
AD
pretty sure
had
that
the-
I'm pretty sure that team had Devin Booker. I'm
They had
pretty
the
Yeah.
sure that
Harrison
team
twins
had,
and
Yeah,
Devin
yeah,
Booker.
okay. Yeah, sorry, I was a year before, my fault. But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Corey. I don't think you're gonna see it unless like they get injured within like their conference tournament. But then also like, and Drew, I'll get your opinion on this here. I feel like there's a lot less opportunities to get injured in a 40-minute basketball game than there is in a 60-minute football game. Like there's a lot less a chance
I
of
don't
you
know.
getting injured in basketball than there is playing
Just because
football.
there's less time, it's a less physically exerting sport.
Um, I think
Possibly, but
I
I
well,
mean, if you ask the people now, they're going to tell you got a bigger chance to get injured after the game.
yeah, well, that's very
mm,
true too. I mean, I feel like just with football, right? You have um so much going on with like an offensive lineman can get rolled up on and in a blocking scheme, right? A wide receiver, he could be going over the middle, get speared out of his shoes like Goldberg's hitting him, and crack some ribs or something like that, right? A running back twists his ankle or cuts and pops something in his knee. I just feel like there's more risk of that, and just because of everything that goes on with the sport of football, than there is with basketball, where it's really, like a freak accident like Kobe and KD tearing their Achilles. Like those
Yeah,
were
oh yeah,
compound
freak
fractures.
accidents. Yeah,
Those
like
yeah.
compound fractures were nasty for a little while.
yeah.
They don't. We don't play '80s, '90s basketball anymore. It's a much softer game now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
Exactly.
mean,
extremely.
but you could take a charge and go knee to knee and tear your
Oh yeah,
ACL
You're
you
just
could
not.
as easy.
you could
Or
turn the wrong way and tear your knee.
the other thing is the one thing I would say in rebuttal to that would just be the injury for basketball. I feel like is a little bit, uh, to me, it's a little easier just because the court is the way it is. Any sweat, any water, anything, your foot goes the wrong direction.
Yeah,
Over in football,
absolutely.
and that doesn't. I mean, it's just. I think football. It's just about the surface that they play on. There's a lot of surfaces and things that work better than what
You're not
some
wrong.
have.
You're not
So I
wrong.
mean, I think it's just anything. You go up for a dunk and you hit the rim too hard, break your wrist.
Yeah. Well,
So I
I'm
mean,
not saying that there's not a risk of injury playing basketball. I'm just saying that there's a less risk of injury in basketball than there is playing football. Just for the sheer like physicality of the difference of the sports, right?
well, they're
Um,
not guarding Shaq anymore.
well, I mean, that's also true. All right, so we transitioned over. I brought up football for a good reason because we're gonna go into a football segment here. Super Leagues, fellas. Seems like it is an inevitability that it is happening. That it looks like now from reports, the Big Ten and the SEC are gonna divvy up the ACC and combine them and go to like 24, maybe 26 teams each. It seems like. I definitely know it's north of 20 because the Big Ten right now is at 18, right? We have 18 teams now with the
Hmm.
addition of the four. So I feel like that's the super leagues are going to be a thing. The rumor now also is that the Big Ten and and the SEC are going to actually separate themselves completely from from the NCAA within the next few years, and they want to start their own playoff system. So Drew, I'm gonna kick it over to you for this to start out this segment here. 5 minutes on the clock. Let's go.
Well, this just sucks, doesn't it? College football used to be so fun. We used to care about rivalries, program tradition, and all this and geography, and the fans being able to travel to their team's games regularly. We're just throwing it all away for money. The root of all evil, as it is. I think this sucks. I think it's going to make college football more like the NFL. And unfortunately, the NFL, I don't feel is as diehard and like, I don't know, care as much as these college fan bases can. Um, I don't know. I think it stinks. I think it's going to drive me to watch more Group of Five and FCS.
Uh, Ethan, we'll go to you here.
Yeah, it's just a. It may be good for athletic talent. It may be good for the best players in the game on the best playing fields. but I don't think it's going to be good for college football. I mean, like everyone says, it's all about the money. Billions of dollars. Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey aren't dumb. They know what they're doing. If they are doing this, hopefully there's going to be some benefit to the players, whether you make them a salaried employee of the university of some sort on top of their scholarship, whether you're just going to have to make sure that there's a betterment for the players because this isn't better for the game. This isn't better for the sport. You've already fractured it with the disbanding of the Pac-12 by reorganizing the Big 12, adding 18 teams in all these conferences. It's on its way down. You're into a semi-professional league, and with the billions of dollars going into these two conferences, I'm hoping, like I said, that there's some sort of employment structure for these kids before they go to the NFL. Maybe the NFL even steps in with uh, Stanky and Petiti. Maybe they get a players' association for some sort of betterment of the league. But as of right now, you're watching the beginning of the downfall of probably the greatest sport on the planet.
Corey?
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit it right on the head, Ethan, with it being being the Big Ten and SEC together. Players are going to get paid. It's going to be a structure to where all good college football players end up in the SEC or the Big Ten. It's just going to be the way it is. I mean, we can go round and round and talk about how awful it is and whatever for the NCAA and how it is about money, but let's just be honest here. Okay, let's be honest here. How many teams outside of the SEC and Big Ten win national championships? So getting as many teams into these conferences is going to benefit the smaller schools that are already in conferences. Sure, you might lose a few, but I mean, like when you think about it from a standpoint of like a Rutgers, if they're in the Big Ten with that, they're going to benefit of some sort and maybe get better recruits because of that situation. You're going to get instead of, I mean, right now we talk about how it's an NFL style, whatever. It already is NFL style. NIL has caused free agency across anything. Nobody is safe. Doesn't matter. A kid can transfer in December and transfer out in March if he's not in the system. I mean, it's literally about money. The sport is about money. It's always been about money. That's why we went from the BCS to the playoff. That's why the playoff is now expanding to 12. By the end of next year, it'll probably be 14, maybe 16. It's always been about money. It's going to stay about money, and that's the way it is. I think the SEC and Big Ten coming together are going to basically disband the NCAA. There's going to be no rules. It's going to be literally a free for all. And we can talk about how, yeah, it's going to be the downplay of the sport, but let's be honest. We're still going to watch the big games. We're still going to watch when Alabama plays Georgia. We're still going to watch when Ohio State plays Michigan. I mean, yeah, the rivalries don't mean as much, but I mean, they don't mean that much now with a 12-team playoff.
You're not wrong. To Ethan's point, when you're paying these guys, like playing like your football players and everything, the one worry I have for that is here's the thing is schools like Purdue, your lower end conference teams, and I'm talking like just your Purdue's, your Indiana's, Northwesterns, your Vanderbilts, of your conferences, those schools are going to suffer, and they may not be. They will, because let's just be honest, they're not competing now with the way things are now, right? Like,
Right. But if you're getting the TV media right deals and that money's
but
trickling down,
but they're not competing now with that trickle down. That's my point. They're not even
But they
competing
also
now.
don't have the NIL funds and funding that other big schools have. If
Correct,
the Big
but
Ten
but you
if the
think
Big
that's
Ten and SEC
but my
have
point
a thing
is
together where they pay players, you're going to see teams instead of Ohio State getting five-star wide receivers, they're only going to get 3 because 1 5-star is going to go to Purdue, whatever, and make the same amount of money as he would if he went to Ohio State. It's going to basically mean that they're going to go other places to play. And I do think that they will work with Roger Goodell in the NFL, and you're going to see those top tier talent going to basically go from making 2-3 million a year to where they're making 5 to 7 million in the NFL. Because right now you have a problem with kids making more money in college than you do in the NFL.
Well, right, but my point is though is they don't have the NIL. To your point though, they don't have the NIL funds now. What's going to make a difference when those TV rights come in? There's because here's the thing, and this is what we forget. Those TV rights aren't going strictly to just the football program or just the basketball program. That trickle down of all that money is supporting your Olympic sports, your lacrosse teams, your women's like softball, your baseball teams, your swimming programs, your wrestling programs. That's all that TV deal money that comes in to all these Big Ten schools. That's what's funding those programs. Not only that, but like the TV deal that Purdue gets, Indiana gets, all these lower end schools like, and honestly I would say any school out in the Big Ten outside of um Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and maybe Wisconsin, they're the only ones that will be able to that can fully fund their football program without that TV deal. I mean, Ohio State and Michigan are um
Oregon, USC.
yeah, but there's only like 5 or 6 self-sustaining football programs in college football. That means whatever they bring in within the season pays for all of their activities. So, and I know for a fact Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, and Georgia are for, and Notre Dame, because obviously they're the only ones who get all that money. But like those
They're
five,
also
and
the only ones who win national titles.
well, you're not wrong, but like the thing is like Florida State's not in that conversation of being self-sufficient. You don't have like a lot of these programs that are, so they will take a hit with, and maybe it's not like their football programs take a hit or their basketball programs take a hit. It's going to be those other sports that don't have national TV, like, you know, exposure. That's what's going to suffer in all of this. And not only that, but like if what Purdue's going to be like, okay, yeah, we get all this money for all these, for like our football and basketball team, but we're not even competing now. Why wouldn't you take those teams and go to a group of five school, join like the MAC, join one of these group of five, conferences where you're going to be competing for a quote unquote national championship with them.
But they weren't. They're not going to be. They were so like in the sense of Purdue. Purdue was competitive. They played in the Big Ten championship a couple years ago. So I mean, like to that extent, now with the way college football is now, it doesn't matter because it's the two best teams, and we might not even have conference championship games in the next couple of years anyway. But I do get what you're saying. But I would hope that if the Big Ten and SEC go away from the NCAA, you would like to think that they would make sure that every team in those two conferences is going to get the same amount. Yes, you're going to have others that are going to make more based on TV deals and bigger schools, but if the SEC and Big Ten separate it the way it should be, you would be having Purdue, Indiana, Rutgers, all those teams in the Big Ten, and all those Mississippi State, Texas A&M, all those schools in the SEC. They're all going to get the same amount of funding. Take whatever out of it, they're going to have enough money to generate all of it. They're not just going to say, "Oh, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, you guys get 300 million. Everybody else gets 10."
Well, no, right. I mean, they're going to do it equally, but I'm just saying like some of these programs are going to be able to sustain that for very long on
But
that money
nobody's
alone.
competing anyway. No, outside of
That's
maybe 10 schools, there's not more than
that's my
10 schools
point.
that compete for a national title now.
That's
So
my
giving them
point.
more money can only make it better.
Maybe. Let's move on here. A big thing coming out of the Big Ten right now is Northwestern is doing renovations on their stadium, and they don't have a home for games except for two. Ohio State and Northwestern will play at Wrigley. I know that Indiana and Northwestern have worked out a deal to play somewhere. Um, Thoughts on this, guys? Here, we'll start with Corey. The time 5 minutes starts now.
It's odd, in a sense of where we're at. But if you've ever been to Ryan Field, I think it is. If you've ever been there, it's not very big to begin with. So I think there's a lot of options. I think at some point you maybe try to figure out where, you play at Soldier Field, you play at Wrigley, things like that. It's just not something you're really used to typically when you do these renovations. The bigger schools that have these renovations get it done because they're adding 5,000 seats or 10,000 seats. They're not building a new whole situation. It's an odd thing, I would say, but at the end of the day, um, it does set up for Northwestern to maybe get more people in the stands by playing at different venues.
Absolutely, absolutely. Drew, you brought this up here for us, so I'm gonna kick it over to you here now.
Yeah, it's very odd. Like we're in March already, and so they got Ohio State at Wrigley, and then they're going to play Indiana at SeatGeek Stadium, which is where the soccer team plays, I believe,
Mhm.
the Chicago soccer
The
team,
Fire. Yeah.
yeah, pro team. Um, but like it's crazy because these are some significant home games. I mean, they're bringing in Duke as their non-con. They've got Wisconsin at home and Illinois at home. So hopefully they can finagle some stuff. Rumor is that Wisconsin game could take place at Lambeau Field, which would, in my eyes, would not make it a home game anymore. Um, so I don't know. Hopefully they could get a Soldier Field game or two. And like Corey said, like if they get some of these bigger stadiums, they could really make some money bringing in a lot of fans. So hope it works out for Northwestern.
Absolutely. Ethan, your thoughts on Northwestern here?
Yeah, I definitely think that I don't honestly I should have thought this through more, but I feel like somebody should have been in a conference room somewhere getting these deals figured out before they started demolition. I have been to Ryan Field with Drew and back when we got to see Saquon play there a couple years ago, the year he was a senior. It is a very homey, smaller environment. It's like a glorified high school with luxury boxes, seated in a very most I can describe would be like if they put it down in Lexington here,
Okay.
local to us down by the parks. It's not something you couldn't do if you didn't. If they have a bigger high school in Chicago, I wouldn't see why they couldn't host it there. You're probably going to have about the same seating structure. The Fire, the season ends usually near the Halloween. The regular season usually ends for MLS around then, so they could most likely work out deals for SeatGeek. I assume a lot of those will be played there. But other than that, there's no reason for them to have to play at Lambeau. That's not fair to them. That's the home game for Wisconsin, whether your name's on the home side of the scoreboard or not.
Yeah.
Um, Other than
Although it'd
that,
be sweet.
Wrigley, I don't personally care for baseball stadiums hosting football games because of the structure and the way the room plays out, but it's a good view. I mean, it's a good seating arrangement.
If you've never
So
been to Wrigley, it's a beautiful stadium. I've been there once to see the
I believe
Cubs
that.
play, and it's a beautiful stadium. I mean, it's kind of like awe-inspiring, like when you're walking down through like the neighborhood there, and you just see this big baseball stadium like in the middle, like literally smack down in the middle of this neighborhood. It's pretty cool to witness. I've actually been thinking maybe of taking a trip to
Mm.
watch Ohio State play Northwestern there, just because why not go see a game, any type of game inside of Wrigley Field, is my opinion. It's just a
I
sweet
mean,
stadium.
man, my first game at Wrigley could be a football game, just like my first game at Ohio Stadium was PSG and Real Madrid. So, it's how that all
Oh
works,
yeah,
right?
we were at that game. We went to that game. Yeah, that was a fun game. All right, we'll end this one here a little sooner. Um, our next topic here that we have um, is the NFL Combine winners and losers. I didn't catch much of the combine. I would say the biggest winner of it out of all of it is Xavier Worthy. He's the most notable combine guy who went out. I would also say Blake Corum was a good winner of that with his small stature. He benched like 27 times at like 250 or something like that, 225. So that definitely helped him out a lot. Um, to me, it just felt like a little down year. For the combine, like I did it without like seeing like Caleb Williams, taking part in activities. Some of these other guys not, participating like Marv. Um, it just seemed a little lackluster. You didn't get to really see like the true star power that was in the draft. I mean, yeah, you did have like Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, and a lot of these guys working out. But it's like the guys that you kind of wanted to see, like your Caleb Williams, right? You wanted to see him throw at the combine. You wanted to see him go through those workouts. So that took away a little of the lust after the combine for me. Corey, this was yours, so I'm going to start here with you on the winners and losers. 5 minutes starts now, guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you run the fastest 40-yard dash time, that's going to be the talk of it. Um, I mean, I watched a lot of it, I would say. Um, I think loser wise is all the quarterbacks that didn't throw. Um, you're just, everything is a rumor in the NFL leading up to the NFL draft. Nobody knows what any team is going to do. I think JJ McCarthy and Penix throwing at the combine, Bo Nix included in that too, is going to help. I know he didn't complete a lot of passes. I think JJ McCarthy helped himself, not running, but everything else that he did. There's also a little bit of a question mark with him, just because he didn't play in a throwing system. Um, but I do like Corum, being able to bench press the same as an offensive lineman. Um, it's kind of impressive. I mean, I think just leading up to it, there was a bunch of um, talented guys that you weren't really sure. Not sure his name, but the guy from Florida State, the defensive lineman who ran in the 4.5s or 4.6s, in the 40 and had a heck of a day. Just a lot of guys. You missed out on a lot of elite talent that should have participated in it, and I think that's just kind of the way things are now. Um, we all would have loved to see Caleb Williams run the 40-yard dash and see Jaden Daniels run the 40-yard dash, Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think it was just kind of a missed opportunity for those guys. But I think biggest winner, you probably are looking at Xavier Worthy. You could even make the case for like a Mike Sanders still, or the corner from Toledo. Those guys had really good combines, and kind of helped their draft stock.
Yeah. Ethan, your thoughts?
Well, I want to start off by saying when I was researching this yesterday and today, this morning before we got on here, found on Pro Football Focus the fastest 40 was actually not run by Xavier Worthy. It was by Troy Fontenot, the offensive lineman from Washington, I think he plays. He ran a 4.01 due to a type error. So figured that's pretty quick for a big guy. So, 4 second 40 is pretty impressive. But on a real note, yeah, Xavier Worthy, huge. Lad McConkey, a 4.340. The Toledo corner absolutely boosted his stock. Was it Quinyon Mitchell? Nate Wiggins from Clemson blew through everybody. Uh, Even was it Cornelius Johnson, Michigan? Yeah, I think he had a pretty standout day. Definitely Blake Corum. Love to see where he goes. Even seen a lot of these guys. It's nice to see guys that do take it seriously still, because a lot of these guys that are better than everyone else know they're going in the top 15 to 25 picks. Don't think they have anything to show because their tape speaks for itself, and I kind of call crap on that. It was nice to see local Cade Stover run a 4.6 in the tight ends, finish in the top 7. So, but I didn't catch much of it either.
Drew, your winners, losers here?
All right. Well, I watched all of it. I'm a very big NFL draft guy, so I'm gonna run through these names quick. These are my winners. These are only I only picked Big Ten guys. Chop Robinson was my number one winner. He's fucking awesome. He ran number 240 time, the best broad jump I think he's a guaranteed first rounder now. Theo Johnson, tight end out of Penn State, blew the athletic score out of the water. He ranked like number one or number two relative athletic score in the history of tight ends. So that motherfucker made some money. Tanner Bortolini, offensive lineman from Wisconsin, number one shuttle, third all time, number two 10-yard split, number three cone. Um, he made a lot of money this weekend. Tanner Bortolini. We mentioned Blake Corum. He had a great showing. The bench press was awesome. He tore it up. Tyrone Tracy, running back out of Purdue. He also looked very good. And then three cornerbacks that I thought made some money was Daquan Hardy out of Penn State, number one vert jump. Max Melton, cornerback out of Rutgers, very good vert, very good broad jump. And then Mike Sarenstill, the Michigan cornerback. He also had a very good day. And then let me just hit you with three losers. Kalen King is a loser. He had a terrible Senior Bowl, bad combine all around. Brevin Spanford, tight end, Minnesota. Yikes. And then Josh Wallace, cornerback, Michigan. He just didn't test very well.
Absolutely. We got a great topic here for us coming right now. Ethan posed this question to me earlier in the week with in a message here, and we got to talking, and it was actually kind of like, all these different scenarios that could have played out. Fellas, what would the college football landscape look like if Rich Rodriguez takes the Alabama job in 2006 and it was not Nick Saban? I'm gonna start the clock here just so that way we have it, but um, man, it would have looked a hell of a lot different with Rich Rod at Alabama and not Nick Saban. Um, my main one thing that Ethan and I talked about was, would this hype over the SEC be still what it is? You know, um, like, would these coaches have went to the SEC? You know, um, when they did, it's just it's just a big big what ifs here. So I'm gonna throw it here to Ethan because you're the one who brought this up here. So
Yeah, I think this it would completely change the landscape of the SEC if Saban doesn't take the job. He wasn't exactly failing in Miami. I did put some hypotheticals together here. I just looked through coaching databases, coaching carousels of the last 15 years, and seeing who was available at the time. Assuming just complete fantasy world here, and that all the coordinators stayed the same, just head coachings revolve. In theory, Rich Rod takes Alabama, has a decent start, falls down. Say 3, 4 years in, what do? You look for a national champion. You go and get Gene Chizik out of Auburn, defending national champion, takes Auburn over Florida State, or I mean Auburn over Oregon. Sorry, over Chip Kelly. Both those guys went to the Natty in their first year. Uh, Say that plays out, Fantasyland, happy paradise, falls off a cliff. Go and get Steve Sarkisian in 2014. Just they been there a couple times now, up and down. Instead of taking the USC job, or he just coming off the USC job, gets Sarkisian, and then after that, Sarkisian's a short-lived. He fails. Kirby Smart. Kirby stays on the staff. Say he's on the staff. DC. He's been there since day one. Promote him to head coach. A couple other theories I got. If Stark doesn't leave or Stark stays longer, you can get Chip Kelly in 2017. And after that honeymoon ends, you go get Lincoln Riley. In the fantasy world, Lincoln Riley ends up coaching at Alabama. But I mean, that's just all crazy. You could theoretically get Brian Kelly too in the same window if something crazy falls your way. But I think the landscape would be radically different. Anything could happen. Coaches could be anywhere right now.
Absolutely. Drew, your thoughts on what if Rich Rod took it?
Um, well, I would my thought was, why did Rich Rod take it and then reverse that decision and say no, I don't want it. Alabama wasn't exactly in a good place. They're not they weren't the Alabama that we know of now, obviously, right? They were coming off back to back good years, but they vacated all of those wins because of NCAA infractions. The whole Mike Shula era came to an end pretty badly. Bama was kind of a mess culturally. It wasn't very appealing. It wasn't the most appealing job. Uh, Josh Pate the other week compared that job back then to today's Nebraska job. Um, so
Fair comparison.
I mean, it's not that great. And Rich Rod's coming off back-to-back 11-win seasons at West Virginia. The '07 season, WV started the year ranked in the top 5. They were a legit national title contender. Um, so that's kind of why, like, I get it. I get why he didn't want it. If he would have taken it, I think it would have flamed out. I don't think Rich Rod's a good coach. Um, so that's the short of that. My questions are, what would have happened to Kirby Smart? Because Kirby was with Saban in the Miami Dolphins. Would Kirby Smart be the Kirby Smart that we know of now? And I think that Saban was doing well with the Dolphins. I think we might know Nick Saban as an NFL head coach today had Rich Rod taken that job.
Alrighty. Corey, your thoughts?
Okay, well, it's a little different for me because Rich Rod was the coach for Michigan when I watched. So, I mean, I think it could have played out a couple of ways. I personally think Rich Rodriguez would have done okay at Alabama. Obviously, he wouldn't have been Saban because nobody's Saban, right? But I think he would have been fine. When Saban took over Alabama, the SEC was average. You had LSU winning a title once every 4 years with Les Miles. But I mean, when you look at some of the teams that were in the SEC, even if Saban wasn't there, the SEC as a conference would have been fine. I don't think it would have been that much different. You would have just had Johnny Manziel playing for a national title, or things like that. I also think Rich Rodriguez was doing great things at West Virginia. His offense works. In the SEC, it's kind of spread it out, put speed in space, and let them make plays, which is exactly what Rich Rodriguez does. So I think in that sense of the word in the world, he would have been all right at Alabama. He wouldn't have been necessarily the greatest, but he would have been just fine. Because at that point, you talk about like Chip Kelly and those kind of guys. Those guys go to Alabama, they're running an offensive thing, not worried about the defense, and they're still going to score 30, 40 points. Um, the landscape of college football obviously maybe looks a little bit different with certain coaches. I don't think Saban would have worked out in the NFL. Um, I think he was okay with the Dolphins, but he wasn't. The lure of Saban, I don't know, would have worked that much in the NFL. So then I look back and potentially look and say, oh well, maybe he would have ended up back at Michigan State. Um, or maybe he went back to LSU when Les Miles retires, or those kinds of things. Um, but yeah,
I
I do think that Rich Rodriguez would have been successful at Alabama, and I think regardless, depending on who you got at the right time, it would have been okay. And looking back with Rich Rodriguez, what he did, obviously he wasn't super successful at Michigan when he took over, but he still got a lot of talented recruits to come to kind of keep afloat. And like Drew said, Alabama was not great. Alabama was like Rutgers. Obviously, they had the history in Bear Bryant and everything like that, but they were not. We're talking about Alabama. Oh, they won 7 national titles or 6 national titles. Obviously, it's not going to be the same, and you can't. No one stacks up, right? So regardless, I mean, if in a perfect world, if Saban doesn't go, Saban might not win multiple national titles. He might not be in the NFL. He might not be a coach anymore. Like it's one of those things where I think it's a fun thing to argue, but I mean, it's you could say the same thing about any team. Like what if Ohio State didn't get Urban Meyer and kept in-house decision, in-house coach, things like that. So I mean, we talk about it because Saban's the GOAT, but I mean, if we look back at the SEC didn't play defense before Saban got there. Alabama won title after title after title. Why? Because their defense was really good. Then Saban was like, oh, all right, let's get a good offensive mind in here, and now we're really going to crank out national titles.
Yeah, absolutely. I
So
mean,
so
I think in 2006, in my opinion, when I look back at that time frame, I could have seen, honestly, if Saban doesn't, like, if Rich Rod takes the Alabama job, I honestly see Saban, and you guys call me crazy, but him and this guy had a lot of history together in Cleveland. I could see Saban going to New England and being the defensive coordinator at the Patriots under Bill Belichick. With the way they were winning back then, you got a strong defensive mind guy. You bring it, you already have a offense that fires on all cylinders. Um, I mean, because what was it, 2007? They signed Randy Moss, and you saw probably the greatest offense in professional football history then. I could have seen Bill Belichick reaching out to Nick and saying, "Hey, if you don't want to be a head coach, in the NFL, like, there's the Dolphins are moving on from you. Come be my defensive coordinator here in New England. We've won, 3 out of 4 years. We won Super Bowls. We're getting back, like, look, we're back in that picture now. Like, that would have been a very hard, I feel like, for Saban, if that would have, he doesn't take the Alabama job, that could have been a hard thing for him to turn down to go be with Bill Belichick, in New England and with Tom Brady. I mean, you had Mike, I can't remember half their defensive guys' names now, but like their defense was still outstanding then. Um, Obviously their offense was clicking on all cylinders back then. But speaking about like just like the SEC, and I raised this question to Ethan. I mean, in 2006, Saban gets hired. Urban Meyer gets hired that same year in Florida at Florida. Does Florida feel the need to go out and get a big name, head coach then? Do they still feel that need because of, knowing like, okay, Saban won a title at LSU. LSU's firing on all cylinders right now. Alabama soon will be. We need to get our guy in, we need to get a big guy in here that can revamp our program to compete against these guys, right? I don't know if Florida does. I don't know if they reach out to Urban at that point and pull him away from Utah. Does Urban stay at Utah? Like Drew even raised the question: is Kirby Smart the Kirby Smart we know today? Because of that, does
See, but
Sarkisian after Sarkisian is in USC and gets fired for his alcohol, for being drunk on campus during practices, does his career get revitalized if it's not for Saban? Does Lane Kiffin's career get revitalized if it's not for Saban? Um, I mean, the one guy that I could have seen them poach eventually, like as Ethan, you were saying down the line, Dabo Sweeney. He's making headlines there in Clemson, getting them to relevancy in 2012, 2013. Do they just go, hey, Rich Rod, or hey, whoever's their coach, like, Gus Malzone or somebody like that? Do they move on from them and say, bring in the alma mater guy in Dabo Sweeney? Um, I mean, I think there's a
yeah,
lot of what ifs that could have happened if Saban doesn't. I definitely don't think Alabama or for that matter, any team in college football from 2006 to present goes on a run like Alabama did. I I think you would see a lot way more parity within the game if Saban was not at Alabama.
You would probably see more prominence out of the Big 12. I
Yeah.
think Texas and Oklahoma would have been bigger players in the long run. You'd still have Florida as a top tier talent. LSU probably still up there. Auburn still probably pretty good, but Alabama's not going to be perennial. Florida State, Clemson, Dabo's been there since '09 season, so I think that he's still going to get his prominence and rise. So maybe in a later coaching window, you could pick up Dabo, and he's still a dark horse. This DeBoer thing doesn't work out. I could see Dabo jumping ship in a period of time. I don't think he's a lifer at Clemson. I think he
As
secretly does want the Bama job at the end of his career.
as you yeah, like as he said, "Oh, I'm Clemson through and through." I don't think so, Dabo. I think you're literally just buying your time and just saying, "I don't want to be the guy who follows Nick Saban. I want to be the guy after the guy who follows Nick Saban."
Don't ever want to be the next guy.
Yeah, I mean, like they were even talking about it on ESPN when Saban announced his retirement that you didn't want to be the guy who followed Bear Bryant. And that's why they were down for so long, because how do you follow that? And I think that's where they're at now. And I mean, I don't know if Caleb DeBoer is the right guy. I don't know if DeBoer is the right guy for Alabama. But I gotta say, as a Big Ten, sports fan, not a big guy in the SEC, don't want to see them, and all that. It's kind of good not to see, Saban there anymore, knowing that no matter what, they're probably going to be in the playoff. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there was a 14 playoff, and I think Alabama missed it 1 year or two.
I think they'll be fine. I think Kalen DeBoer's got the right mindset, the right culture. Once he gets his guys in there, player wise, you're not going to see much of a drop off. They're not going to be undefeated every year. They're not going to be number one every year, but they're not falling out of the top 10 often. They're going to be there come the final 12 or 14. God forbid we make it 12 and 14. Um, yeah, I think they'll be just fine. I think he'll do well.
And I think you're right too. And Corey and Drew will get your opinions on the other side of this here, but I do think you're right, Ethan. Going into like the 12 team playoff, and then they're now talking and expanding it to 14 or 16 teams, which is honestly just ridiculous.
Terrible.
But
Terrible.
but I do think in the way college football is going, like the path that it's taking, um, I don't think you have like you're so quick on getting rid of coaches. How like before, like, oh, we've given you 6 years, you haven't made it into like a BCS bowl game or like a New Year's Six bowl game. We're getting, we got to move on, because we want to compete for those titles. Like you said, I don't think Alabama's definitely probably not going to be number one recruiting classes anymore. They may still get those, right? Every once in a while, like every couple of years, they may have a number one recruiting class. They'll definitely probably still be in the top five, but I do think, you know, as long as you don't need to go undefeated anymore, you just have to, at minimum, like Corey and I've talked about multiple times, if you're an SEC team or a Big Ten team, you pretty much just need to have two losses, and you're in the top
Counter,
12.
also, uh, outlier season. We go to 12 this year, I think, because I try to ignore it. This year with Florida's schedule, 8-4 gets them in the playoff.
It possibly could.
100%. 8-4 gets this year's Florida team in the playoff if they can pull it off.
Good thing they
Absolutely.
won't.
Yeah.
Good thing they're trash.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make the same argument for like 3-loss Michigan this year.
Yeah, 9
I
and 3
mean,
is
I
SEC
mean, like
Big Ten. Yeah, I think you're right.
Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon. If those are your 3 losses, all three of those teams are in the playoff next year. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like to me, I think it's just one of those things where everything's about money. right? And that's what
Yeah.
it comes back to. It's about money. Um, and
It's all gonna be.
it's
It's
just
always about money.
that's what it is. And I think on the DeBoer front, I think Alabama's going to be just fine. There's not even Kalen DeBoer is probably the third best head coach in the SEC right now.
Behind Lane and Kirby.
No,
I
I'd
would say you
probably
go
put Kirby
Kirby,
and Sark.
Brian Kelly. I'd say you go
No, Brian Kelly, no
Kelly.
chance. What has Brian Kelly done? He gets good recruiting classes and then poops it up in the regular season.
Don't sleep on that Ole Miss team. That coaching
Also,
staff's probably the best in the
also,
big
also,
SEC.
I don't
Kalen
disagree.
DeBoer had good recruiting classes at Washington. When you follow Nick Saban, people want to go to Alabama regardless if Saban is there anyway. His offense is top tier in college football. His defense will be doesn't matter because they'll score 40. Um, um, so
Yes.
I mean like that's the thing. The thing is what made Saban so good is it wasn't yeah, he had top recruits and everything like that, but he also got the 6'8", 3-star, 350-pound offensive lineman and turned that guy into the number one overall pick. You know, it
Yeah.
Just a
wasn't necessarily
hoss.
the recruiting class. It was Saban wanted to play bully ball, and he knew that you may be faster, you may be stronger, but they're going to run the ball down your throat and be more physical. And that's what he brought to Alabama. And I think DeBoer is not that kind of coach, but Saban is still in the building.
Yep.
You can't sit here and tell me that
I got a
Saban's going to let it go.
I got a bonus topic here. I'm gonna start the clock at 5 and then we'll end the show after the
Oh,
clock runs out. Bonus topic: Saban said something that led to his retirement was after the Rose Bowl. When he went into the locker room, he had kids asking, "Am I going to get playing time? How much am I going to make next year?" and all this stuff. I'm going to start the clock just to get. And I'm sure we're all very familiar by now with that his quote there. So I'm just going to start it off there. I think that was definitely a big decision in his. When he heard that after a loss, I do feel like that was the moment he knew his time was up. Like like his era of and mindset and culture was just, I don't want to do this anymore. There's better, not like there's better things I could be doing with my time than worrying about an 18-year-old kid asking me how much money am I going to make and what's my playing time next year. Because if not, I'm going to the portal.
I mean, yeah, but if that kid's Caleb Downs, maybe we can sit down and talk. But on a real note, yeah, I think that that was definitely a sign that he had been passed by the current culture of the game, the current attitudes of the players, the current landscape of college football as we know it, and again, the turning point of what's going to happen going forward, which is why, again, pointing to earlier, they need to work on either collective bargaining, a players' association, or a salary thing to where I will pay you X thousands of dollars. You have to commit to here for 2 or 3 years to get that money, and that's what you're going to get before NIL takes effect because it's just a rat race of, yeah, how many dollars can I see and what are you going to do for me?
Absolutely, Drew.
It's not surprising hearing that. Um, it sucks. If I were Saban, I would also retire. Or I think Chip Kelly had a similar thing. Chip Kelly just wants to coach ball. He doesn't want to kiss your ass and tell you how much money you're going to get. And you see what he did. He took a demotion. I think we're just going to see a lot more of these older coaches just retiring and just not wanting to deal with this stuff. I think Dabo is going to retire here soon. A handful of other guys, just because there's no rules still. There's still no rules for this NIL and all this, the transfer portal. And it's, it is still the wild, wild west in college football. and that's just not appealing for long term.
Absolutely. Corey?
It was his toughest coaching job that he's had at Alabama this past year. Obviously, he's old school. His pitch to recruits doesn't matter anymore because he's not throwing millions of dollars at kids to have them commit. I mean, let's be honest. Nick Saban is going to Nick Saban, right? If Nick Saban was on the sidelines, regardless of NIL, anything like that, he's still going to make Alabama good. I told you at the beginning of last year that I thought it was Saban's last year. I said all along I thought Alabama was going to go on somehow. The football gods were going to just let him win another national title and he would just ride off into the sunset. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. They still had a shot to do it that way. But I mean, like, it also, like, when you look at his teams, right? If you go back, like, let's just say, like, 5 years ago, Alabama was so far better and beyond than any other team in college football. Not saying that there weren't others that were good, but you were good if you could compete with Alabama. If you could be on the same field with them and not lose by 30, you were competing with Alabama. And when you looked at Alabama this year, they still have a bunch of talent. They still have top tier recruits. They're still top recruiting classes, but just they're not better than anybody. They're literally the same tier as every other college sport. Everybody else had to come up to Saban's level, and they finally got there after
Decades.
15 years.
Okay.
I mean, what college coach can you say if you went to school there and stayed 4 years, you won a national title? At least one. No one, nowhere, no one.
Bear
You know,
Bryant,
I mean,
but
like,
yeah.
you have coaches now that just want to make the playoff, and that's good enough for them. Saban won a title once every 4 years. Like, that's unheard of. And it's because he was just better than everybody else. Yeah, you could say, oh, yeah, he had great staffs. His staffs were better than everybody else. His
He never
players were better than
Yeah,
everybody else.
he never
It
missed on
was
a coordinator hire.
it was, I mean, it was like, oh, everyone took him. Oh, when he took Sarkisian off the down thing, whatever, everyone was like, oh, I wonder what it's going to look like. And what happened? Their offense was better than everybody else's. It
Yep.
was just the aura of Nick Saban wasn't there. And you could see it kind of at the end of last year, once, and maybe even 2 years ago, once Georgia started to take the reins of the SEC. It was coming down to, and let's be honest, Saban is also older than the majority of these coaches that are in the game now.
I also think, too, part of Saban's thing was he built his program on work ethic, grinding it out, being disciplined and everything. And with like the um, culture and climate of college football right now, that's not a thing. You know what I mean? It's not, are you going to grind this out? Are you going to work hard? It's where can I go to make money? Where can I go to make money and play? And that's what I'm going to do. And
I don't have to work hard anymore.
yeah, I don't have to work hard anymore, and I think that's where, and from the moment Saban stepped on Alabama's campus, I feel like his message every single year was, we're not going to get beat because we're not working hard and we're not disciplined. If we get beat, it's because that team was just better than us, and that's okay.
Yep.
But he was going to have his players ready to play every single week. It didn't matter who it was.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
I'm going to leave us on that note. We'll have Drew mentioned it earlier with Chip Kelly. That's going to be on the show next week. We're going to dive into a little bit other stuff here, college football related. Next week, I know we're heading into the big conference champions like the SEC, ACC, Big Ten. They're going to be having their basketball conference championships for the men closing up next week on Sunday as well, Championship Sunday. So, and Selection Sunday. So we'll get to those. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.